is a universal law that every child deserves to grow up with a Spider-Man cartoon. And a new one from Marvel Animation called simply Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man just came out on Disney+, and I got the opportunity to sit down with the showrunner, Jeff Trammell, and ask about what the fans can expect. Or, gush about my favorite suit. You guys threw in my favorite suit that Spider-Man ever wears into the trailer. But the Future Foundation suit. Are we doing the Future Foundation, or is it just because it looks awesome?
It's because it looks awesome.
Okay, I had a feeling. Just wanted to ask. All of the designs so far for all these characters have been so fresh and interesting. Stylistically, seems to be drawing a lot from the 60s. It's the very Lee Ditko vibe. Is that the main era you guys are pulling from, or are you also pulling from any other distinct Spider-Man moment?
We're pulling from all over. There's definitely, the Lee Ditko vibes, as well as like Darmita Sr., but also like Eric Larson. We pull references for him for certain characters, or when Spider-Man gets a bit more comfortable after his initial kind of growing phase of like getting used to web swinging, getting more comfortable in his suit, he starts to hit those classic McFarlane poses. So periods of all throughout where we're pulling from, and all types of references, not just from comics, but shows, films, games. Like, we're all big fans of Spidey and kind of everything he's involved in. So this felt like the perfect way to honor that.
And I think that's very clear with this cast you've assembled. Mm-hmm. This wild, eclectic group of people. Nico's around. I think Tombstone was in it. Wave. What was the process of getting this specific supporting cast together? Like, how did you pick these characters?
Honestly, it came from, just a love from all these characters. Once we knew that we were going to kind of deviate from the traditional group that Peter's kind of around in the MCU, it was like, okay, well, now we have these characters, we have these new roles that we need to fill, and who's interesting and who's fun to use for those spots. Nico, Wave, Jean Foucault, like all characters that I really love in comics, and would hope that like people come to the show, meet these new characters, then follow them to the comics and go check out Runaways or Avengers Academy or things of that nature. And I think, that's a really cool thing too. We have this Marvel universe. We have all these characters at our disposal, rather than kind of reusing a lot of our classic characters, being able to give a shine to some of these new characters as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the wider Marvel universe. I'm sure you can't give too much away, but how much can we expect the wider Marvel world to bleed in here? We saw glimpses of like Captain America, I think Doctor Strange. Any big names we can expect to see play a role with Spidey?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing too, is like, we are very fortunate in that we're the first Marvel Studios Spider-Man show. So just that in itself means that we can like use characters like that. We can have Doctor Strange pop up, and it's, the Doctor Strange we're familiar with, or just having like Daredevil pop up, and like, yeah, that's Charlie Cox. Being able to do certain things like that is really cool. So yeah, you'll have those moments where you see kind of the larger backdrop of the MCU and how it affects our world, but we are still very grounded, very contained. But that's not to say that sometimes our world and that world don't bleed into one another in terms of seeing, some of the Avengers.
So is this set in the MCU, like Tom Holland's Spider-Man? Is that who we're meant to be following, or is it a different?
I like to think of it as it's an adjacent universe. This is basically like if Tom's Spider-Man, went down a certain road and certain things shifted in that world versus in our world, he went the other way. It's very much like it's a tangent universe where things are a little different and a little the same. So it's everything but maybe slightly different.
Was it difficult at all to try and imagine Spider-Man as a young man now? You have like him streaming and stuff. I saw like Screwball was mentioned. Was there a thought of like bringing Spider-Man into the Gen Z era, or was it more just keeping it timeless?
We're just keeping it timeless, to be honest. Like, I think, so much of our show is drawing from that classic look, the kind of the 60s style. So already, it's going to feel in a lot of ways nostalgic, but we're still trying to modernize it. There's still cell phones. There's still, it's not in the 60s, basically. So
right.
Being able to show that, like, although these characters look retro but modern, they're still in a modern world. This is still the time that, we're living now and we're familiar with. So a lot of it was just, like being able to lean on stuff like that. That said, like, Spider-Man's gonna fight streamers that are dumb enough to stream while they're robbing people, and like
Absolutely.
make sure that like that's a thing that we really wanted to touch on. Is like, yep, this is still modern day, but there's a lot of classic influences.
Harry, I saw, seems to be the one big usual supporting character that's still sticking around. I feel like most people would go with MJ or someone if they were going to bring a specific person over, but Harry's one of the more forgotten ones of his side characters usually.
For me, it's that. Like, I think there's something really interesting to Harry. I know there's so many different versions of Harry. Sometimes they're portrayed as like, oh, they're like brothers, and other times they're kind of just like, yeah, we hang out because our girlfriends are friends, So like, for me, it was fun to like find a take on Harry where he and Peter both feel like they have something that the other one thinks is really cool about them. And without getting into too many details or too many spoilers, like I think there's a reason that Harry looks up to Peter, and there's a reason that Peter thinks so highly of Harry. And I think that's a really interesting dynamic for them.
If you can't answer this because it's a spoiler, that's totally fine. But we see a lot of Norman in the trailer. We don't see a lot of the other guy. Is this before goblinization? Post goblinization?
Bold of you to believe that there's a goblin in this show. I think that's something you gotta watch the show to see. I think Norman is so incredible in this show, and Coleman Domingo brings him to life so well that like there's always a tinge of like, is what he's saying genuine? Should I trust it or not? As you're watching the show, I'll let the audience judge for themselves if there's a goblin in there somewhere, or if that's just a really sweet man that wants to help Peter Parker.
Just a real nice guy, Norman Osborn. Speaking of people he's fighting, was there any villain that you were like, thank God I get to use this rogue in this show?
All of them. I love all of them. I'll say, one that I really love that we got a chance to do something with is Scorpion. He's one of my favorites, and he is a terrifying individual, and I think we were able to really show that in the show that he is a huge threat. So I was really glad that we got to do that with him.
And then on the flip side, is there any characters, villain or otherwise, that you couldn't quite get in, but you, like maybe in a future season or something, you'd love to see Spidey come up against? If you got everyone, you got everyone. That's also great.
Yeah, there's one I want to say, but I think it's a big spoiler, so I'll hold back.
Okay. Fair enough. And then this is kind of random, but I just asked people that follow me what kind of things they were curious about. And one question everyone had was, between Nico Minoru showing up and the teases of people like Doctor Strange, are we getting the more mystical side of Spider-Man that's never really been addressed outside of the books? Or is it not magic?
I think that's a good question. Hey, one thing that I really want to hang my hat on is we are a show that is about a street level Spider-Man that hasn't been super prevalent, in a lot of recent incarnations of Spider-Man. So I think he's great as a street level character. I like keeping him very grounded, but there are moments and exceptions where, especially in season 1, where things change a little bit. But at the end of the day, it's all about that friendly neighborhood. It's about keeping them very street level hero. I'm not going to say no, though. I think there are a lot of avenues we can go down, and I'm very excited to explore quite a few. And we can't wait to see it. Now, thank you again, Jeff, for joining me, and everyone out there. Remember, Marvel Animation's Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man is streaming now on Disney+.